Now we're going to go on to our next presenter, Dr. Christopher Tienken. Dr. Tienken, I first heard him at Carroll County when he was talking about the Common Core, and I'll tell you what, Christine and I sat and we listened to him and said, we've got to get him up here. Sorry. Got to get him up here to Howard County because he's dying. Got to listen to him. So Dr. Tienken is turn back. Dr. Tienken is Assistant Professor of Education Administration at Seton Hall University in the College of Education and Human Services, Department of Education Management, Policies and Leadership. He's authored over 80 publications, including books, chapters, and articles. His new book, which is co-authored with Don Orlick, is entitled The School Reform Landscape, Fraud, Myth, and Lies. He presents papers regularly at state, national, international, and private venues. He has ongoing research with colleagues at the University of Rome in Italy and the University of Capena in Sicily, and was named as a visiting scholar at both universities. His research interests include school reform, issues such as influence of curriculum quality on student outcomes, and the validity of high-stakes standardized testing as decision-making tools to determine school effectiveness. He was awarded the Kappa Delta Pi Truman Kelly Award for Outstanding Scholar in 2013, and has received the National Staff Development Council Award for Best Research in 2008. He has public school administration experience as a pre-K through 12 assistant superintendent, middle school principal, director of curriculum and instruction, and an elementary assistant principal. He began his career in education as an elementary school teacher. He is currently the editor of the American Association of School Administrators, Journal of Scholarship and Practice, and the Kappa Delta Pi Record. That's a mouthful.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's my pleasure to be here with you. So just a little context of the way that I approach issues of curriculum and assessment. And it really comes from this idea of first identifying clearly the need for an intervention. So what is the need for a new curriculum or a new test? And then also identifying the effectiveness of those interventions. So if you're going to put a new curriculum in a school or in a country with 50 million children who attend public school, you probably first want to see that it might have been piloted or field tested. You might want to see some evidence of its effectiveness. So that's how I'm going to come at my comments tonight. For the idea of, do we really need this for all 50 million children? I'm not saying the Common Core might not be good in some places. And then also, is there any evidence of effectiveness for it? All of my comments tonight come from my writings. If you have a smartphone or an iPad, you can download some of my work right as I'm speaking. All of the data will be in those articles. Just go to my website. Any slide that you see tonight with the name Tienken on it, there'll be the name of the article after. So all of my research is transparent. You can check my citations. You're free to use any resource on my website at any time. Of course, I can't cover everything in 15 minutes, but I do want to investigate some of these claims of the need for a Common Core and the effectiveness of them. So first and foremost, I have to say the Common Core was never field tested. It was never piloted. In fact, my home state of New Jersey, we were lucky enough to adopt it before the final standards even came out. There's no evidence of what it will. It's funny, but not if you live in New Jersey. No evidence of what it will or won't do. Almost 50 million public school children are compelled to take it. And so I asked, should there not be some evidence for the need and for the effectiveness? It's kind of like, when you give your child, two young children too, 6 and 8, they're in the public school. When I give my child a medicine that has not been approved by the FDA, that's what I'm being asked to do now. There's no evidence to support this initiative. Two major claims by the proponents of the Common Core for the need to standardize and centralize the education system of 50 million public school children. First and foremost, on the website, you'll see something about America is competitively lagging behind international peers in academic achievement. Usually what most people point to are rankings on tests called the PISA and the TIN. These are tests of reading and mathematics, sometimes science. International tests, given every few years. They connect that low ranking that the U.S. has had since 1964, since the first international test has ever been given. We've always ranked near the bottom. We do have the strongest economy in the world. The economic strength and future of the United States relies upon American students outscoring the rest of the world. So if you just look at history, that we've never scored well on any international test ever given, yet the economic strength that we've produced since 1964, there seems just on the face of it, there's something wrong with that argument. So what I do is I read the technical manuals of these tests. They're about 500 pages. It's thrilling reading. You ever get bored? Just for you. But what you find deep inside of these technical manuals from these international tests is they tell you none of the scores or ranks from these tests should be used to judge the quality of education system of any country. And they cannot be used to predict or explain economic growth of the country. They're just not designed to do that. Every test has a purpose. The purpose of the PISA and the TIN are not to explain. They're not designed to explain economic growth or quality. And that's because, generally speaking, between 5,000 and 10,000 kids from a country take this test. And in many cases, the testing populations can be somewhat different than the testing population in the United States. Since we have the Statue of Liberty that stands outside of New York, we take everybody. So our testing population represents everyone. That's not so in Shanghai or Macau, China. It's not so in Singapore and some of these other countries where you have different testing populations. Now, I'm not saying that we can't do better. Of course we can. I'm just questioning if there's only one way to do better. And if there's any evidence for that one way. But even with tests that go back to our curriculum and all these other issues, we outperform the world when you compare apples to apples. And what kind of apples am I talking about? Well, when you break down these data by poverty, childhood poverty, we are number one in the world. In our schools, where less than 10% of the kids are poor, we outscore the world in mathematics, reading, and science. This is less than 10% childhood poverty is like Finland with 3.6%, Denmark, Switzerland, Norway, Germany. All of these, Shanghai, well, the kids who are in public school age 15 in Shanghai, less than 10% poverty. So what you have is when you compare apples to apples, we do quite well. The problem is we have more poor apples here. About 23% of our children live in poverty. You just don't find that in other industrialized nations. So that's a different kind of problem. That's a different issue. Furthermore, the claim of the relationship between international test rankings and economics is empirically bankrupt. I have looked into this personally, and many other researchers highly more qualified than I have. I've looked at every test since 1964, could not find meaningful, statistically significant correlations between the rankings on these tests and economic strength. And you can measure economics any way you want to slice it, PPP, GDP, per capita, however you want to look at it. So what we're finding, though, in some new research we're doing, that countries that score higher on these tests, their economy was doing very well leading up to the test. And this goes along with some economic literature that suggests, in the G20 countries, the largest, the 19 largest economies on the planet, it's really economics that drives education because their levels of education are already so high. So while it's true that if you increase the education level in Ghana, let's say, everyone graduating high school, that will have a very large effect on GDP in Ghana, but not in the G20 countries. We're already so highly educated. It's not about education, it's about industrial policy for us. So the World Economic Forum ranks us always in the top 2, 4, 3 in the world in terms of economic competitiveness. We've dropped recently, not because of education, but because of banking discretions on Wall Street. The World Economic Forum cites very clearly some of the issues that's dragging our economy down. And it's not because our fourth graders are not performing well on a standardized test. According to international data, we have some of the highest percentage of high school graduates and high school completers in the world. We're ranked 6th in terms of completers. We're ranked 9th in terms of graduates. Now keep in mind, some countries allow students up to age 21 or 25 to be considered a graduate. We do not do that. So we're at somewhat of a disadvantage there. But we still rank pretty high. China, depending on the data, 28 to 44%. Most of their kids are not in school at age 15 when many of these international tests are given. Contrary to what you're told, we produce a lot of IT and engineers. We do not have a supply side problem. We have the supply. It's the demand, and many of these people need the job because they're not well paid jobs. IT and engineering research jobs are not that well paid. When you talk about the quality of the engineers that we're producing, based on surveys of human resources people across the world, several reports, one from Rutgers, one from Duke University, 81% of U.S. engineers are qualified to work in multinational corporations, compared to 25% and 10% of those produced in India and China. So it's very unclear to me how we are not competitive there. What about creativity? In the knowledge economy or the innovation economy, whatever you want to call it, there's certain drivers that go beyond the basics. Not saying we don't need the basics, we do, but we have to go beyond them. Those things revolve around creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. A very long-term indicator could be Nobel laureates in science. So if you look over time, the U.S. obviously has ruled that domain. Now some of you may be saying, well, Chris, that's all from the space race. We got all our Nobels back then. Well, maybe not, because since the year 2000, 33 people have been awarded Nobel Prizes. 20 of them have been American. And by the way, 60% of Nobel Prize winners come from American public schools. In chemistry, since 2000, 31 people were awarded the prize, 20 have been American. Now, once again, this is downstream. I understand that. 35 people were awarded Nobel Prizes in medicine, 21 were Americans, just since 2000. Utility patents. These are the things that, I care about. If you have an iPhone, it has a couple of utility patents in it because it's useful. There's other patents that are kind of like bobblehead doll patents. We're not really that concerned about those. We want the high-end, innovative patents. U.S. 121,000 in 2012, the rest of the world 132,000. Japan was next closest with 50,000. So on the high end of innovation and patents, we're producing. Are some of those from foreign-born people? Yes. Are the majority from American students educated in American schools? Yes. Global Entrepreneurship Index ranks us third in the world. That's a good thing, especially in a capitalist economy where we need entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurial aspirations, we're number 1. China's near the bottom. In terms of turning those aspirations into reality, we're number 6. See, the other countries are smaller countries. You put their populations together, they do not even come close to that of the United States. China is once again near the bottom. Global Creativity Index, number 2. China's number 58. Now mind you, all of these surveys were conducted on adults who went to school before there were quote-unquote standards, before No Child Left Behind. When curriculum was decided in many cases at the local level. So there's always been standards. The issue is we've decided them locally. And there seems to be a movement now where some groups, some people, whether they be corporate elites or do-gooders, feel like we are no longer able to make those local decisions. The technical term for that is fraternal humility. You and I know it as, I know better than you do. And I'm not so sure, in a country that has a history since 1607 of running things locally, that that's the case. Innovation, once again, before standards, fifth in the world. So lagging, I'm not so sure about that. Now, of course, I only have 15 minutes. If I had 15 hours, I could show you a lot more data. The real issue here, if you're worried about economics, this thing called technology transfers and industrial policy. The Chinese are not going to out-educate us. We are giving away our high technology, our multinational corporations, so they can do business in China. The 2 latest big ones, GE and Boeing. Boeing wants to sell Boeings in China. GE makes all the colorful stuff that lets the pilot fly the plane. They want to sell stuff. China said, no problem. Come over, set up the Boeing factory, set up the GE factory, transfer the technology patents, and teach us how to make Boeing. Now my concern is, when I'm 30 years from now, still traveling around talking about this, I'm going to get on a plane, and I'm going to look, and it's going to say, made in China. Not because we don't have the skills to do it here, but by poor industrial policy. Trade policy, Yale study just came out. There's a direct correlation with the loss of manufacturing jobs in the U.S. and allowing China into the World Trade Organization and opening up our trade with China. The more we trade with China, the more manufacturing jobs we lose. There's another claim by the Common Core standards that they're internationally benchmarked. Well, here's the report. I've read it several times. Nowhere in the report can I find, do they crosswalk the standards that came from specific countries. So if we're interested in being like Singapore, which I don't know why we would be, but if we are, I would at least like to know which standards were taken from Singapore and put into our Common Core. Because I'm told by my bureaucrats in New Jersey that they're internationally benchmarked. We took the best standards from the best countries. If they can't show me which one, we're left to assume. And then, is it okay to take various standards from various countries, put them in the order that we put them in? Will that get the best results for 50 million children? I have not received answers from from those questions from my bureaucrats. We have to keep in mind, because of the testing, and I know this is an implementation issue, I understand that, but because of the testing, Common Core is considered mastery standard. All students are supposed to demonstrate mastery on the day and time that the bureaucrat in their state chooses. That's called testing day. The problem is some portions of the standards are outside of the developmental mastery level of kids. That does not mean that all kids can't learn all of those standards. They can't. The implementation issue is when you test kids in only one way and expect them to get it right the first time on the day you choose, not all kids may be able to do that because of the developmental stage they're in. Okay? We know how many kids are at mastery in the various developmental stages in this country. For the past 40 years of psychological research, we know how to set standards. We know how to set achievement targets on standardized tests if we want to do it correctly. There's a difference between rigor and developmentally inappropriate. To get to Dr. Stotsky's point about less standards, there's not really less standards. Here's a first grade standard. There's a lot of commas in there. And here's why. One of the things I do is I go through the standards and I take them apart, bit by bit, piece by piece. And I create the requisite objectives that kids would need to master in order to demonstrate mastery on a test. So when you go through this grade 1 macro, you have 3, 6, 7, there's actually 9. I didn't put it up there. There's 9 substandards within that one standard. And the ones marked in red are ones that could give a majority of the kids problems on the day of the test. Doesn't mean they can't learn it, but they're very abstract. And depending on how they're tested, it could pose a very big problem for those kids, and they could be misleading. So I ask, can just 2 subjects prepare children to access to thousands of college options, even make them attractive to admissions officers who control those options? Math and language arts. There's more to life than that. One size fits less, that's because what are students missing by being forced to focus so heavily on the limited curricular possibilities provided by the Common Core? What do they not get? What's being crowded out? If your child likes portions of the Common Core, then by golly, you should take those portions. But I question whether you should be mandated to take the whole thing. How can it be that future plumbers, information technology personnel, graphic designers, certified auto mechanic, pastry chefs, you name a job? How could it be? Some of those jobs not even created yet. Remember, the preschool kids of today graduate about 2036 from college. Some of which have not even been invented yet. How can they require to master the same set of skills with the same emphasis at the same level of difficulty? I am not saying that mathematics is not important. I am questioning whether all kids need to know it at the same level of difficulty, in the same format, at the same time. Once again, that's an implementation issue. I know that. There's a lot of research that say multiple career paths, multiple curriculum paths through high school can lead to just as many kids or more getting to college. So why don't we let parents and students, education professionals, community members choose the best path for them? Offer multiple paths through high school. One curriculum is not going to fit everybody. That's the issue. You can certainly have a common core path, but you need more than one. If you want standards set that are developmentally appropriate, actually you would tier them. So there's multiple developmental levels within the standards. So I think superintendents, parents, school board members, teachers, students, they have an important say to what gets taught and when, and they should have that say. The problem is, once again, we're being told what to do. We have no real choice. Go to your school board and ask them to change the math curriculum. See what they tell you. Should community members who pay local taxes have authentic democratic input into their schools? Democratic input. Of course, never rely on one standardized test to make life-changing decisions about children. Once again, that's an implementation issue. Although the Common Core isn't a test, the makers of the Common Core were very clear. It's on their website. It says, it is our hope that a test will be used to monitor the implementation of these standards. Multiple measures, use multiple measures. We have a long history of being able to use multiple measures to look at the vibrant picture of child's needs, talents, passions, and aspirations, provide multiple curricular paths to get there. Truly meet the needs of all kids. Don't just say you're meeting the needs of all kids. Do it. Leaders can no longer parrot bad information or fraudulent claims that the standards are needed because U.S. students are lagging in ways that really matter, or they're internationally benchmarked, or they're even evidence-based, or they're superior to your local standards. When was the needs assessment done on your local standards? With all due respect to my colleague at the end of the table, the Fordham study that he mentioned, Fordham Foundation ranked or graded state standards. There's actually a negative correlation between the grades on the Fordham study, the state standards, and how states perform on them. If you want a copy of that study, you want to look at Dan Anderson, the National Association of Public, Catholic, and Independent Schools. And I know Michael didn't do that study, so I'm not attacking you at all. I know you didn't do that study. I did. Okay. I'm not attacking you, students. Even as a colleague, I'm not attacking you. Should there be evidence of the need for intervention? Yes, correct. Children have no defense against bad policies. We could probably do things better locally, but we can be informed by national guidelines. Okay? It doesn't mean it's the Wild West and we do whatever we want here. There are best practices. There is a large body of research on what is best practice in mathematics, language arts, and other standards. We can implement those at a local level. In closing, once again, I'm not against standards. We've had them forever. I just think that they should be developed locally based on needs and evidence. Common Core might be good for some, but for all 50 million children, I'm not so sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, I did, that was a little bit over 10 minutes, but we wanted to hear all, very, very important for us to see where we are as a nation.